Okay, so imagine this. You're in a courtroom, you've been charged with a crime. You're standing there trying to stay calm, hoping the judge sees your side. He looks serious, maybe even fair. You've done everything you can. But then something unexpected affects the decision. Not your case, not even your history. Just whether or not the judge had lunch. In Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman talks about this wild study. Researchers looked at over 1,100 parole decisions made by Israeli judges, and what they found was kind of shocking. Right after the judges came back from lunch, they were way more likely to approve parole, but the longer they went without eating, the more likely they were to say no. It wasn't the type of crime, it wasn't even the prisoner's background. The only real difference was that the judge was hungry. Kahneman puts it like this: the mind is a machine for jumping to conclusions. And when we're low on mental energy, we tend to go with the easiest option. In this case, that meant saying no. Not because it was the right call, but because it took much less effort. So here's something I didn't realize when I first started reading Fast and Slow. And honestly, it changed how I saw the book. Daniel Kahneman actually won a Nobel Prize for this work. Not in psychology, even though that was his field, but in economics. Because what he did was so groundbreaking, it reshaped how people understand human decision-making, not just in labs or theory, but in finance, policy, business, everything. And suddenly, that made the book make a lot more sense. When I was reading it, I found myself thinking, wait, isn't this just common sense? Like, we've been hearing for years that subtle things around us, ads, headlines, music, even colors, can shape how we think or feel without us knowing. I grew up with this stuff. I remember seeing it in textbooks and TV shows. So reading Thinking Fast and Slow now, I couldn't understand why it was such a big deal. There were moments I genuinely thought about putting it down, but here's what changed my mind. Kahneman was one of the people who made these ideas mainstream. A lot of what feels obvious today is only obvious because of how deeply his work influenced our world. So even if the ideas don't feel revolutionary now, they were when he introduced them, and that's why the book matters. Take the concept of priming, for example. He talks about a study where people were asked to unscramble simple sentences. Some got neutral words, others got words related to aging like Florida, wrinkle, and bingo. After the test, the people who saw the aging-related words actually walked more slowly when they left the room. No one mentioned age, no one told them to move differently, but just seeing those words passively, unconsciously changed their behavior. And I think this really speaks to a larger debate. There's this famous quote. I'll dive deeper into it in another video. Can't remember the psychologist's name right now, but he said, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that a man can alter his life by changing his state of mind." And I think this quotation is super powerful, but when I connected it to Kahneman's work, I really realized what it is that he's trying to say. That sometimes your environment changes your mind before you even realize it. The headlines you scroll past, the lighting in a room, the tone in someone's voice, it's all influencing how you think, feel, and act. And that's why I think this book deserves more credit, not because it tells us that not because it doesn't tell us what we haven't heard before, but it explains clearly and deeply why we're so easily influenced. It gives structure to something we all kind of sense but rarely pause to examine. Now, let's talk about something we all use. If you're watching this video, then I can rightfully assume, of course, you're on a social media platform, so of course you are familiar with the algorithm and so on. And so when you're scrolling, you might think that you're just doing so for fun, and sometimes maybe you are, but behind the scene, The algorithm is choosing what you see. According to Kahneman, that matters more than we think. Watch a few hustle videos and you might feel like you're falling behind. Scroll through luxury lifestyle clips and suddenly your own life can feel less than. Not because anything changed, but because of what you were just exposed to. That's an example of priming in everyday life. And it's exactly the kind of invisible influence Kahneman wants readers to notice. But here's where things get a little more personal. Not everyone reacts the same way. For some people, watching hustle content, especially when it's rooted in Stoic philosophy, can feel inspiring. It's a reminder that we can grow, improve, and stay grounded. And even luxury content, sometimes it makes my life feel a little more fun, like I'm the main character in my own story. It can make small moments feel special, not inadequate. So while Kahneman's point about unconscious influence is important, I think it also depends on how we relate to what we see. There's a growing awareness, especially among younger generations, that not everything we consume has to dictate how we feel. Sometimes we're just entertained, sometimes we're actually empowered, and that's where the real work comes in. Knowing how things influence us, not just that they do. Kahneman gives us the framework, but what we do with it, that is up to us. He breaks it down into two systems. System 1, fast, automatic, and intuitive. And then there's System 2, which is slower, more deliberate, and more effortful. Here's the thing, System 1 is always on. It helps you get through the day. But if you're not careful and if you don't pause and switch gears, you're not really thinking, you're simply reacting. So what do you actually do with all of this? You can't turn off System 1, and Kahneman would be the first to say you really don't want to do that. It's fast, efficient, and helps you get through your day without having to second guess every little thing. But the trick is learning when to slow down and when to question your own certainty. Kahneman doesn't offer hacks or 10 steps to better thinking. What he does say, both in the book and in interviews, is that awareness alone isn't enough. Even he admits understanding these biases doesn't make you immune to them. He spent a lifetime studying this stuff and still catches himself falling for the same mental shortcuts. So the real work isn't about mastering your mind. It's about building habits of mental humility. And that starts with 1, noticing your reactions, especially when you feel certain or when your judgment feels instant. Ask, where did this thought come from? Number 2, creating friction between stimulus and response. A pause, a second look, a habit of reflection, especially in high-stakes decisions. And lastly, paying attention to patterns, not just what you think, but how often you think it and whether those patterns serve you or hold you back. And most importantly, be willing to be wrong, not just about others, but about yourself. Kahneman writes, you are more likely to learn something by finding surprises in your own behavior than by hearing surprising facts about people in general. I'll be honest, thinking fast and slow didn't completely hit me the first time around. It felt a little dense and some chapters dry. If you've been exposed to psychology or behavioral science before, parts of it might even feel familiar, maybe too familiar. But the more I sat with it, especially while working on this video, the more I realized that familiarity is kind of the point. A lot of the ideas in this book feel like common sense now because Kahneman helped make them that way. His work shaped the way we talk about decision-making, intuition, and bias in schools, media, even everyday conversation. So while the book might not feel life-changing on every page, it's one of those works that lives in the background of how we think. And once you realize that, it starts to feel a lot more powerful. For me, I think this is one of those books I'll come back to, not just to understand the science better, but to understand my own thinking a little more clearly each time. So, yes, I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're curious about how much of your process is automatic and how often your logic might actually be a shortcut. It's not about becoming smarter. I think that this book, it's about teaching you to become more aware. And I think just because of that point, this book is truly worth reading.